July 8th, 1947. A day that launched what some claim is the greatest government conspiracy of all time. In Roswell, New Mexico, the U.S. Army Air Force announces the capture of a flying saucer. Within hours, the military report is changed. The debris was just a weather balloon. But instead of settling the issue, questions about the Roswell incident only grow deeper. Stories of a military cover-up of an alleged UFO spread across the world. Now, 70 years later, a scientist from Roswell claims to have found remains of the actual craft. Possible proof that this ship was not from this planet. Is this finally evidence that Earth has been visited by extraterrestrials? Or just another silly conspiracy theory? My name's Jennifer Marshall. I served in the United States Navy for 5 years. I've been working as an investigator in some capacity since 2014. As a veteran, I'm drawn to mysteries alleging some type of government cover-up or conspiracy. I need to know the facts. The problem with claims of UFO encounters is that there's rarely any evidence to investigate. But this one may be different. When leading UFO journalist Ryan Sprague contacted me with what sounds like a compelling new lead in the Roswell mystery, it was an investigative opportunity I just couldn't pass up. I've agreed to help Ryan look into this, but I plan to examine the alleged evidence very closely. Ryan?
Hey, Jennifer.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Yeah.
For me, this is a very personal journey. When I was a teenager, I had a UFO sighting that I could not explain, and it scared the hell out of me. I've been searching for answers ever since. I have traveled all over the country questioning people about UFOs, conspiracies, cover-ups. We have a gentleman who has materials from the Roswell UFO crash.
What kind of materials?
Metals, physical evidence that we can look at. What's really interesting is the guy we're going to be talking to, Frank Kimbler. He's looked at aerial photos, and he was able to triangulate where the exact crash site was. It's been clouded in secrecy for a really long time, but I think we actually know the impact site of where this happened.
I can tell that Ryan is super enthusiastic about the topic, but sometimes when people want something to be true, they convince themselves of evidence that just isn't there. I'm skeptical. It's been a long time.
I understand that. You would think that by now everything would be gone.
Right.
But this guy, he's been out there for 9 years on his hands and knees looking at this crash site. I'm out here to find the truth. Do I believe it's possible aliens visited us in 47? Sure. I'm the kind of person who I'll believe it until you can prove to me that it's not real, that it didn't happen.
I'm the opposite. Show me the proof, show me the evidence, and I'll believe it.
Jen's a little skeptical of the crash story, but that's okay. I think once she learns the facts, she'll see that the official story, it just doesn't add up. I want to give you a tour, and then I want to go meet Frank.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Cool. Jennifer, this is like the Mecca for us UFO researchers. This is the UFO museum on your right here.
Okay.
It's astounding.
There's a lot of kitsch, a lot of green-headed alien type stuff, a lot of touristy type memorabilia, but there's also a great collection of documents and photographs, so we're excited to see what we uncover here.
The Roswell incident has been at the epicenter of all UFO discussions for a very long time. It begins when a sheep rancher, Mac Brazel, finds unusual debris on the ranch. When he tells authorities that it looks like a crash site, the nearby air base sends Major Jesse Marcel to investigate. Based on Marcel's findings, the Army Air Force issues a press release to the local newspaper, the Roswell Daily Record, announcing the recovery of a UFO. But the next day, the Army Air Force, under the orders of General Roger Ramey, changes the story, claiming the first report was wrong. The debris was just a weather balloon.
This affidavit from a woman that worked at Los Alamos is really intriguing. It says when she contacted her boss about this, she was told her clearance wasn't high enough. Why would a clearance matter if it was just a weather balloon?
My dad and brother both ran the paper before me, so it's in my blood. I grew up, you know, coming here and...
Do you have any personal things that are connected to Roswell or the UFO phenomenon that you've personally been privy to?
My dad was in the military. He was a no-nonsense business kind of guy. And he told me that he knew the Ballards who had the funeral home. That night, they were asked to come with 4 small coffins.
Small coffins, like?
Child-sized coffins.
Child-sized.
And my dad also confirmed that. They were told to leave them at the base, to not go into the base.
And there was no explanation given as to why there would be a need for 4 child-sized caskets out at the military base?
You know, my dad said it was really odd, and he wondered about it too at the time, but the cover-up seems to be very effective.
Right, and you have so many people like him coming forward and saying, I was ordered to do this. I didn't ask questions. They may not even have known what they were actually doing there.
Right. Can you imagine being in 1947 and in the military? You didn't question things. You kind of did what you were told. You weren't encouraged to question or use critical thinking skills.
It's really eye-opening to me. Barbara's story about the caskets, I thought she was credible, but so far, this is all second or third-hand information.
Our AAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. What I find really interesting here is they're talking to the Wilmots, who actually had UFO sightings a week prior. The Wilmots, ranchers in the area, said they saw a UFO traveling at an estimated 400 to 500 miles per hour.
So this is from an article that says, harassed rancher who located saucer, sorry he talked about it. Brazel said that he had previously found 2 weather observation balloons on the ranch, but that what he found this time did not in any way resemble either of these. And I think that's really telling because he's in the middle of nowhere. They send 2 of these up a day. Clearly he's used to seeing what they are.
It's same with Major Jesse Marcel. Both of these individuals know what a weather balloon looks like. Marcel in these press photos, have you seen them? Here's Marcel with the weather balloon.
Even look at his face though. Even look at his face.
Yeah.
His face is like, are you kidding me?
Like, you're making me do this, really? Here's General Ramey. This is really interesting. This paper in his hand. With your experience, what would a general be holding right there in reference to all this?
I mean, if they're talking about a downed weather balloon, clearly he's well experienced in weather balloons and weather balloons going down. I don't...
Look at this one. So we were able to zoom
close.
in. Yeah. Can you decipher any of that? It could be like a very big piece of evidence in this entire thing.
You know, if we could get a higher resolution photograph, I know some really great photo analysts, there's no reason that they shouldn't be able to decipher at least some of what's on this photo. Maybe not everything.
Absolutely. I'm continuing to search for the truth. I can't wait to meet Frank Kimbler. I want to know how Frank located the actual crash site. I want to know how he found the metals, if they've been analyzed or examined yet even. I can't even say how exciting it is to know that I'm going to be able to touch these materials that possibly could be from another world. When I was 12, I was on a weekend getaway with my parents, and I was fishing off a dock. It just turned dark, and I was by myself. I remember as I was reeling my line in, I saw these lights in the water. Naturally, I look up, and I saw the white lights, and they were in like a triangular formation, and there was like this, like a hazy red light in the center of it. I couldn't see any like machinery, any structure to it, but I couldn't see anything behind it. Stars, the moon, nothing. And it was just hovering there above me, just completely silent. All I could hear was the water. I couldn't move. I was terrified.
How long was it there for?
A minute tops, but it felt like forever. My father, actually, I started yelling for him, and as he's coming out, the thing started coasting over the water, and then it just disappeared.
And what did your dad say?
He told me that it was a plane, but he did not see that thing hovering right above me. He didn't know that it was silent. None of that. So, I mean, to me, even at 12 years old, I knew that that was not a plane.
And so I guess for months after this and years after this, you kind of wondered what else it could be?
I did look into if there were any military bases nearby at the time. I did contact the local FAA to see if anything weird had been in the sky that night. They returned nothing. I feared that people might think I'm crazy, and I didn't tell anyone about this until I was in college. I know witness testimony can't be taken as actual evidence. I completely understand that, but I personally, I can't discredit that. I can't.
Is there evidence that UFOs visited Roswell? It's time to meet a man who claims he has the proof.
Right.
Because this case is 70 years old and this is potentially new evidence, it is very exciting.
Hey.
So I do want to talk to Frank, and I want to find out, the conditions under which he collected the evidence. Yeah. Jennifer.
Jennifer, nice to meet you, Jennifer.
Pleasure to meet you. The fact that he's a science teacher, it means that he has definitely more experience in education than the average person who would have found this material. However, I need to look at everything and see it from start to finish. I just can't take on his excitement because then I wouldn't be doing my job.
So what I used to teach school with here, it's called an augmented reality sandbox. And this is a nice digital representation of the crash site. And you can make it rain simply by holding your hand over the top of it like this. You can make it rain, so you can actually get a picture of how the water actually rolls off the land and where it accumulates, which is what I use to help locate some of the artifacts.
So utilizing this, can you explain the crash site to us?
Oh, absolutely. The object came in out this way, and it came in this direction, and it made what's referred to as a furrow. It spread out kind of in a V shape, and then according to the eyewitness accounts, there was also a gouge mark. And it's kind of an interesting thing because the metal artifacts that I have found seem to be centered right on the area where the gouge mark is.
How big was this crash site?
This area is probably maybe twice the size of a football field. But the debris was scattered for a distance of more than half a mile.
Do you still have the aerial photos that you used in your research?
Yeah, they're right over here. Let's cut the lights. This image right here is from 1954. It's the first aerial photo I could find of this area after 1947. There's something that I kind of honed in on in this picture pretty fast, and you'll notice this white area right here. There are a series of steps. Can you see the little white steps? The little steps, I refer to them as dozer tracks. It looks like the sharp edges of where bulldozers have come in and sort of scraped the land. The military was cleaning the area up, and they were very systematic. Now, if you come over here on the 1946 picture, that line is gone. So this has been changed between that. The damage that was done to the area happened after 46. Now, what happened to the land between 1946 and 1954? I have actually found metallic artifacts within this area and along the edges of those dozer tracks, small pieces of material.
Frank, I am dying to see the metal.
Inside this container, they are the material that I picked up out at the debris field. You can see how they're all twisted and mangled up. These specimens are untested, but these are some of the things that I would like to have some really good science done on these things.
Would you mind if we held them?
It's fine, go ahead.
Sure.
Okay. You're not going to get some kind of disease off of them or anything.
This one, to me, is interesting. It looks like it's almost curled back. It's bent.
When metals are subjected to a lot of stress, they fold and bend and twist around. And not only that, they usually end up being small pieces with jagged edges, or the edges might be melted.
It seems to fit a scenario that something crashed at a high speed.
And that is the kind of thinking that I went on as well.
This is insanely light and very, very strong.
You're right, it's incredibly strong for its size. There was some analytical work that was done up in Canada. And he says, well, we found 3% molybdenum, and I'm going, oh my gosh.
What does that signify?
That's unusual. It's essentially impossible with current technology to have 3% molybdenum in those aluminum alloys. And that's why we need to have more testing done on them.
We can do that. We can make some calls, get you some names, people who are very well versed in metallurgy, who are working in the aerospace industry.
I want to make sure that if somebody says that this is an extraterrestrial alloy, that the rest of the world is going to believe it. If they come back and say, oh, it's Mr. Rancher's beer can, then I'll accept that as the bona fide truth. Something happened out there, and I want nothing but the pure truth.
Well, I can tell you that's what we want to.
My gosh, if it comes out to be of extraterrestrial origin, we're going to have something that's world history making.
Thank you, Frank.
You're welcome.
We have our mission. It's time to get this metal tested and extract the truth.
All right, I want to look at several of these photos. Look at that. It looks like they made this thing yesterday.
The way that the pieces are cut up is weird to me too, because it looks like the pieces, they're so symmetrical. If they were smaller pieces, I could understand why he could mistake it for a weather balloon, but they're so symmetrical. If there was some sort of crash landing, you would assume that, you know, the pieces would be small.
Let's look at this one.
General Ramey, I can't stop thinking about this photo. Can you zoom in on the memo? You know, given that this was taken in 1947, we can't really see what's on it. The lighting isn't very good, it's kind of blurry. But now we have photo analysis techniques that didn't exist then. So I'm hoping that we will be able to evaluate this and actually see what's on it, not just words, but maybe even complete sentences. Because if we can ascertain exactly what's on the memo, then it blows everything wide open. I did some digging, and there is a copy of the original negative at the University of Texas at Arlington.
Do you think that's something you could get your hands on?
If it exists, I can get it.
I want to go back to this photo for a sec. That look on his face, I cannot get that out of my head. That "are you kidding me" look. I was able to get in touch with his granddaughter, Denise Marcel. I want to get to know that man a lot better. For 30 years, Jesse Marcel Sr. kept quiet about what he actually found at the Roswell crash site. When he came forward in 1978, his claim that the debris seemed otherworldly was confirmed by his son, Jesse Marcel Jr.
Since 1947, I saw this strange material, not of earthly manufacture. It made me feel that we're not alone, that there's others out there. This is something that came from outer space.
Today, Denise Marcel is the keeper of the family legacy.
My grandfather was Major Jesse Marcel Sr. He was the intelligence officer on the 509th Roswell base during 1947. That is when the world changed, I would say, at that moment. My grandfather was on the base when he received a call from Sheriff Wilcox, who said that he had a rancher by the name of Mac Brazel down there saying that he had found some really odd material on his property.
Your grandfather found the wreckage, he got it into his car, and he was so intrigued, enthralled by what he'd found that he wanted to stop home and show this to his wife and to his son.
My dad and my grandmother were asleep. It was probably around 12 o'clock at that night.
So how old would your father have been at this point?
He was just about to turn 11 years old. My dad recalls when he went into the kitchen, he's like, why are you waking me up to show me all of this junk? But he could also, at the same time, he could see that my grandfather, I guess, was extremely, extremely excited about what he saw. He's like, I believe this is probably pieces from a flying saucer. My dad, one of his things was he couldn't believe how light the metal was. And it was like, he said, about as thin as tin foil. He got the impression that if you dropped it, it would probably just flutter down kind of like a feather.
Wow. All right, Denise, so I want to take a look at these. So we have your grandfather right here in the room with the supposed wreckage.
This is clearly a weather observation balloon. I can say with absolute certainty, this is not what my grandfather found. They pre-positioned a weather balloon in General Ramey's office for him to take photographs with. And there wouldn't have been any reason to fly this out to Fort Worth to show them this. I mean, come on. Yeah. That makes absolutely no sense.
Look at this expression. Yeah. You know, he's really showing his emotions in here.
As I've gotten older, my opinions change. I always thought that was a, like, you gotta be kidding me kind of look. But now I think there is some fear in his eyes there. What did I just get involved in?
What did your family just get involved in?
Right, what did I just show my son and my wife? Right. I mean, in the course of a couple of days, his whole world was turned upside down. Yeah. He always said, you know, I hope before I die that the truth is gonna come out, and that didn't happen.
So you've been waiting for this for years.
This is a dream come true for any UFO researcher. No matter where you land on the Roswell case, being out here and going to the actual presumed crash site is so exciting. I mean, I've interviewed hundreds of people who've seen UFOs, who were directly involved with this incident. I have no doubt something truly powerful and impactful happened to these people. I don't know, what do you make of that?
So I do think that empathy is important. But if somebody tells me a story and they're deeply affected by it, that's nice, but I still need to see evidence.
But at the same time, when you have Jesse Marcel bringing these pieces home to show his son, to show his wife, this material comes from an alien spacecraft. What do you make of something like that?
To me, he already had a preconceived notion of what it was. With him being in the military, he knows that the US constantly has secret things that they're working on. That's why we have clearances. And for him to kind of just jump to that conclusion, that also makes me question where he's coming from and what he's ultimately trying to prove or ultimately trying to claim. Mm-hmm. If the aliens come for you today, are you ready?
I'm ready. I've been ready since age 12. So this is allegedly the crash site.
I'm anxious to see what's over the hillside.
I mean, I'm sort of seeing what Frank is talking about here. I see it. I can see, you know, almost where this road leads, you can see where it comes out here.
But if you look at all this land, right? He's talking about if it was piloted, then they specifically chose this arroyo because they could kind of come down this way. But this isn't mountainous, this is pretty flat. So if you look at everything, there's plenty of safe places to land if it was in fact a piloted craft of some sort. I think I hear something. I think I hear something.
It must be Frank.
He said he's gonna bring his son today. Hey, Frank.
Hey, how's it going?
How's it going?
Hey, pretty good.
Sheldon.
So this is it, man?
This is where it happened, right here.
It is so desolate out here.
This place is kind of eerie because it's so quiet.
That's the feeling I got. I mean, Mac Brazel, his sheep, wouldn't come anywhere near this area that morning, am I right?
That is, matter of fact, the sheep wouldn't cross this area for, 6 months or a year? They would not even come into this area, and all the animals stayed away from it. What I believe happened here was, in 1947, an extraterrestrial craft came in. They had some kind of mechanical problems, or maybe they got struck by lightning. Maybe it was interference with radar. Something caused them to lose control of their craft, and they came to this very spot and crashed here. Right here is some of the places where I had found the material, where it had washed down from the hill slopes and against the sides and all down into this sinkhole area, concentrated by the action of erosion.
This is where the runoff came down. So we're talking the impact site. How far would you say up this way that would be?
Okay, so the impact site started basically right at the base of that little hill right there, and it came down this way. It's the furrow, the gouge mark left by the object that was dragging across the ground.
Being here and seeing the actual site, seeing the levels, seeing how everything runs down here, it makes complete sense to me what Frank has come up with. It's perfectly logical.
So it is this arroyo?
Yes, it's this one right here. This is the one where it came in and left the gouge mark. So it skipped the hillside.
You know, I was really skeptical when we first came out, and I expected to see a place where humans were and that you would see evidence of humans. You would see trash, but now that I've been out here, there's no trash. There's no proof that anybody's been out here, so it's really surprising that Frank found metal here.
This is like the perfect area, and you'll hear a sound. Sounds like this when you run across a piece of metal, and it'll find stuff that's really, really tiny.
Now, is it possible that you said that it'll search 3 feet deep? Is it possible that over 70 years, something would be more than 3 feet down? Something of that weight and material?
No. The material is very thin and very lightweight, and unlike gold or iron, it doesn't sink. It works its way to the surface.
So when your dad, when he first brought you out here, and he said, we're gonna go out and metal detect, and we're looking for alien material, did you think he was nuts?
I had heard the stories of Roswell and the crash site and all that, and him being of a fairly scientific background, that's pretty interesting for him.
This place is in the middle of nowhere. It's desolate, it's a wasteland. There's no reason for anything to be out here, yet we've found metal. I will say this, the universe is far too large for us to be the only intelligent species. It's entirely possible that something could have happened out here.
I think it's undeniable that something happened, whether it was a weather balloon or a secret aircraft or a UFO. I am a veteran. I tend to believe that the military has a lot of things that they cover up, and I'm more believing that it was something that the general public didn't know about rather than a UFO from outer space. One thing that I repeatedly see in my research is a project called Project Mogul. It was actually a program that was highly classified at the time. So I've reached out to Alejandro Rojas. He's a journalist with a lot of experience researching UFOs. What can you tell me about Project Mogul?
Project Mogul was a top secret project that started in 1947 by the Army Air Force. They were sending microphones into the atmosphere using balloons similar to weather balloons so they could listen for seismic waves. And these waves gave them information about Soviet nuclear testing.
So is what we see in these photographs a Project Mogul balloon?
So what was found in Roswell is not what's in those images. Those images were a cover-up.
We were told that the Roswell Funeral Home was asked to bring 4 child-sized caskets to the airbase. What do you think about reports that bodies were found at the crash site?
The second report that they did on the Roswell incident claims that people saw bodies, but that these weren't aliens. They were crash test dummies that they were dropping out of airplanes. However, the project where they were dropping these dummies didn't happen until the late 50s, which is well after the Roswell incident, which we all know happened in 1947.
Why do you have to stage a photo op? Why do you have to do a report? Why do you have to give an explanation to something if there's really nothing going on?
I agree, and I think what's interesting and really credible is Marcel's testimony himself. Years later, when he talked to UFO researchers, he had felt that the truth would come out at some point, that what they found was not the balloon, it was not Mogul, it was something much, much more mysterious.
Frank has decided to let me get some of the pieces he found at the crash site analyzed, only because I'm bringing them here to Atlas testing labs. These guys should be able to tell us what we're possibly dealing with. Very nice to meet you. Thank you so much for doing this today. All right, this is how it was given to me, so I'm gonna hand that over.
Perfect, alrighty.
What do you think? What kind of tests are you gonna be doing with these?
So we'll be testing these for elemental composition. We're going to be running them for aluminum and for moly. Moly is short for molybdenum. And then we're also going to be running them against known aluminum standards, a 3000 series, to basically see if it corresponds with anything like that.
Okay, so we're looking at 2 tests.
Correct. So for the test, basically, we're going to have to cut your sample down to size, and then we're going to use acid to dissolve it and turn it into a solution. And then we're going to be able to run it through the ICP, and that is going to then give us whatever the elemental constituents are.
So when Major Jesse Marcel was flown to Fort Worth, he was asked to do a photo op with the remnants of what was discovered at the crash site. And in that photo op was Brigadier General Ramey holding a memo that we have yet to have deciphered. So I reached out to Ben Hansen. He is a forensic photo analyst and he previously worked for the FBI.
So Jennifer, as you know, this photo is one of the most iconic pieces of the Roswell puzzle, right?
Absolutely.
The high-res copies that are out there of this negative, of this Ramey memo we call it, are pretty good in one sense, and in another sense, it's very frustrating because we've kind of reached the limit of where I think we might be able to get with it. So as you can see up here, we have the original full photo. Take a look at the screen there. What we've done is we've flipped the whole photo 180, okay? So you're looking down at it as if you were behind General Ramey's shoulder.
Right.
This second line, I think, is probably the most clear of everything we have in this message, and it's important.
That clearly has 2 letters. So given the context, that I can clearly see F-O-R-T.
Matching that.
Could possibly be an I, but it's not an I because it's Fort. It looks like Fort Worth, comma, T-E-X.
They're in Fort Worth, Texas.
All right, this is what I've been waiting for.
Okay, so 3 out of your 6 samples were not able to fully dissolve. And when they did dissolve, they basically broke down into some sort of organic-looking material that we are not able to run here at Atlas. We are, strictly a metals lab, and so we're not able to run the organics.
Correct me if I'm wrong, it had elements of metal or alloy or whatnot with an organic as well?
Yes, so it could have been a metal with some sort of, film over it, or, we definitely don't know.
All of our tests are complete. Ethan is in there right now, crunching the numbers, and soon we're finally gonna get our results.
Let's look at one other thing here. On the 3rd line down, okay, if you look right here, now you may not be able to make out the exact words, but do you see any grammatical punctuation there? You don't see a comma, right?
No.
Look right here.
Is that an asterisk or quotation?
Quotation marks.
Okay.
In our modern day, if you put something in quotations, and we do this all the time, right?
Right.
It's what we say when it's ambiguous what the message, like, it's kind of like, I don't really know what to call this. You put quotations around it. Okay, either you're quoting a person, okay, as a fact, this is what they called it,
Right.
or you're saying, I'm not quite sure. As we look now at the individual letters, I see 1, 2, 3,
I see
4.
it. I see it.
What do you see
I
in
see
there?
it. D-I-S, and it looks like it could be a C or a K. It's disc. I see it.
So one of my favorites, if you take a look at this right here, what letter can you see there?
This one?
The next line above it, right there.
I mean, if I had to guess, I would say a V or a Y.
That's exactly what I was thinking. You really have 2 choices,
Right.
V or Y, okay? The one next to it.
I'm not in the business of guessing, so I
Okay.
have troubles with this, but if somebody said an eye?
Okay, I would go with that as well. And as you go along here, we can see, let's say it's a V or a Y, we have an I, we can see individual letters that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6, I'm guessing. Would you go with that?
I would go with that. Gosh.
Do you see what it says?
It looks like it's home.
Right now, Ethan is in the office, crunching the numbers, getting everything together. He's gonna be bringing a few more people into this to look at it. I gave Jennifer a call. I'm hoping she can get here in time to hear the results.
A prior test of these aluminum alloys found impossibly large quantities of molybdenum, suggesting that they may not have been man-made. So the question is, will this new test confirm that the metal is not of this earth?
So you guys brought us 6 pieces. And what we had to do is we had to digest those 6 pieces into a solution using acid. Of the 6, we were able to digest 3 of them completely.
And what does it mean if you're not able to digest a sample?
We couldn't dissolve it, and we can't test that.
No, why only 3 of the 6?
There was some kind of organic material in it. Could have been plastic or dirt or any organic material. And because we're a metals testing lab, we really can't test organic materials. So one of the samples, it had 98.6% aluminum in it. We had one other sample that was 92.5% aluminum.
Now, in terms of that one element we were really looking for, the molybdenum, we were told by another lab that it contained 3.0%.
It would be really unusual, to say the least. But we did run for the moly specifically, and that was 0.006%. So again, much lower than the 3% that you were anticipating.
That's a drastic change.
Yeah.
That's a huge difference from what we were told.
So I have to admit, I'm really disappointed because when Frank had given us the results from the other lab and said it was 3% molybdenum, we thought, you know, we have something here. So to hear that...
It's disappointing. It's an answer.
And what would be a reason that you would see 3% molybdenum in a metal like that?
Perhaps the wavelengths were just misread by their analytical machine. Basically, the moly wavelength is pretty similar to a few other elements wavelengths. Perhaps that was where the error potentially occurred.
That difference in the molybdenum was kind of what we were really banking on and hoping you guys would find.
So your equipment is standardized to known elements, correct?
Correct.
So if there is an unknown element, you wouldn't even be able to pick it up.
Right, if the machine wasn't standardized to the element, we wouldn't be able to detect it.
But that leaves us with some unanswered questions about those other ones. Well, thank you guys for clarifying a lot of this for us.
It's our pleasure.
You know, I think that we should get back because I got some information from the photo analysis that we should talk about.
Okay.
So when I met with Ben today, unfortunately, we weren't able to see exactly every sentence and every word of the document of the Ramey memo, but we did get some good information out of it.
Okay.
So there were 3 things that definitely stood out. So the first one is location. It clearly says Fort Worth, TEX.
So they were in Fort Worth. That makes sense.
The second one was in quotation marks, and it either says DISC or DISK.
So definitively disc of some sort.
Definitely, but I think that it says something that it was in quotation marks as opposed to without quotation marks.
Yeah.
It's kind of implying we don't know exactly what we found, but this is what it best looks like. The third thing is perhaps the most telling. You can clearly see that it says the word victims. So if we go by the report issued by the Air Force in the early 90s talking about how what happened at Roswell was actually Project Mogul, that doesn't make any sense. There are no victims if you're launching balloons to spy on the Russians.
And I mean, I've spoken to so many people who claimed that there were bodies found at the crash site.
Well, the government came back and said, no, if there were bodies, it must have been crash test dummies.
Then why would they need caskets that were child-sized?
Since when do you bury crash test dummies?
Right.
Let's take a look at some of the things that we have.
Okay, so let's look at Marcel. First officer on the crash site. He knew that was not a weather balloon. So, I mean, the cover-up started immediately.
Right.
So I keep coming back to these, Jen. Flying discs, saucers. I mean, why would this headline even exist? This was by the military.
Yeah, the headline was given to them. Right?
Yeah.
You know, when we refer back to the crash site, we've got these bulldozer tracks, which doesn't make sense. You don't bring a bulldozer in if it's a weather balloon. You don't bring a bulldozer in if it's a balloon that crashed because of Project Mogul. You just go and pick up the pieces. So the fact that they had a bulldozer going through the area.
Yeah, that just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, all of this is way more questions than answers.
I wanted to think this was extraterrestrial. I'll go and believe in it, prove to me it's not. And I think that's kind of what I wanted out of all this, was to get that smoking gun. I thought maybe it would come with the materials.
Right.
The people looking at this case, the older researchers involved, they're frustrated because there's so many dead ends, as we found. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the younger generation getting interested in this case, refusing to let it go, and whatever lay at the source of this cover-up, whoever lay at the source of it, I refuse to let it die. They wanted this to go away forever, and I refuse to let that happen.
Absolutely.
This investigation isn't over. In fact, we're only getting started. There's materials that still have to be tested. There's the crash site itself. The possibilities are endless of what could still be out there.
I think the fact that we saw those words in the memo means we're onto something. We have to go back to Roswell. The story of the child-sized caskets has to be pinned down. You know, when we first talked, I had made very clear to you that I needed evidence to determine one way or another. I am confident in saying there was a cover-up of some sort. It was not a weather balloon. It clearly was not Project Mogul. Something else happened. So I think that we can definitively ascertain that there was, in fact, a cover-up. But what exactly they're covering up, it's still not clear.
So where does that leave us?
Like I said, more questions than answers.